The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the rocky terrain of eastern Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Marcus Reed wiped the sweat from his brow as he scanned the compound ahead through his binoculars. His SEAL team had been tracking a high-value target for 3 weeks, and intelligence suggested the man was hiding in this remote village, nestled between 2 mountain ridges. Marcus turned to his team leader, Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan, who was studying a satellite image on his tactical tablet. The mission seemed straightforward on paper. Get in, capture the target, and extract before dawn. But Marcus had learned long ago that nothing in combat ever went according to plan. The team consisted of 8 highly trained operators. They had worked together for 2 years, moving through some of the most dangerous territories in the Middle East. Each man knew his role perfectly. Communications specialist Danny Chen was already setting up encrypted channels. Breacher Tom Hodges checked his explosive charges for the 3rd time. Medic Brian Foster organized his kit with practiced efficiency. As darkness fell, the team moved into position. They approached the compound silently, using the natural terrain for cover. The village appeared quiet, almost too quiet. Marcus felt an uneasy tension in his gut, the kind that came from years of experience in hostile environments. The compound walls were mud brick, typical of the region. Intelligence photos showed 3 main buildings inside, with the target likely in the central structure. Lieutenant Sullivan gave the signal, and the team began their approach. They moved like shadows, each step calculated and deliberate. Tom Hodges placed a small breaching charge on the outer gate. The explosion would be controlled, just enough to break the lock without alerting the entire village. The team stacked up weapons ready. Marcus took his position 3rd in the entry order, his rifle raised and finger resting outside the trigger guard. The charge detonated with a muffled crack. The gate swung open and the team flowed through like water. They swept the outer courtyard quickly, clearing corners and checking for threats. Everything seemed abandoned. Empty cooking pots sat beside a cold fire pit. Laundry hung motionless on a line. Then the first shot rang out. It came from somewhere high, perhaps one of the surrounding buildings. The round struck the dirt near Danny Chen's feet, kicking up dust. Immediately, the team took cover behind whatever they could find. More shots followed, coming from multiple directions now. Marcus pressed himself against a low wall, his heart pounding. This was an ambush. They had walked right into it. He could see muzzle flashes from at least 4 different positions around the compound. The enemy had been waiting for them. Lieutenant Sullivan's voice crackled over the radio, calm despite the chaos. He ordered the team to fall back to a defensive position near the compound's east wall. They moved in pairs, covering each other as bullets whipped through the air around them. Brian Foster dragged his medical kit as he ran, keeping low. A round struck the ground inches from his hand, but he kept moving. The team regrouped behind a thick stone wall that offered some protection from the incoming fire. Marcus counted the enemy positions. At least 12 shooters, maybe more. They were surrounded on 3 sides, with their only exit route being the gate they had just entered through. But that path was now covered by enemy fire from elevated positions. Tom Hodges tried to return fire, but every time he exposed himself, a barrage of bullets forced him back down. The enemy had them pinned completely. Their superior training meant nothing when they couldn't even raise their heads to shoot back. Danny Chen worked frantically to call for air support, but the mountains interfered with their communications. They were in a communications dead zone, cut off from any quick reaction force that might save them. Lieutenant Sullivan assessed their situation with grim efficiency. They had maybe 30 minutes of ammunition at their current rate of fire. The enemy seemed content to keep them pinned while reinforcements arrived. Once the sun came up, they would be completely exposed. Marcus reloaded his rifle and tried to spot the enemy shooters. The darkness made it nearly impossible. The muzzle flashes gave away positions, but by the time he aimed, the shooter had already moved. These weren't untrained militia fighters. They moved with discipline and coordination. A grenade landed near their position and Tom Hodges kicked it away just before it exploded. The blast showered them with rocks and debris. Brian Foster checked everyone quickly for injuries. So far, they had been lucky. But luck only lasted so long in combat. The team had trained for situations like this, surrounded, outnumbered, and running low on options. But training scenarios always had a planned extraction point, a backup plan that guaranteed survival. Here there was none of that. They were truly on their own. Marcus thought about his family back home, his wife Sarah and their 2 daughters. He had promised them he would come back safely. He always did. But this time felt different. The weight of the situation pressed down on him like the Afghan heat. Lieutenant Sullivan gathered the team for a quick conference. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. The enemy fire had intensified, suggesting more fighters were arriving. Soon they would be completely overwhelmed. Just then, something strange happened. One of the enemy shooters on the northern rooftop suddenly stopped firing. Marcus noticed it first because that position had been the most active. He watched through his night vision scope, trying to understand what had changed. Then another enemy position went silent, and another. The volume of incoming fire dropped noticeably within 60 seconds. The team looked at each other in confusion. Were the enemy fighters retreating? That made no tactical sense when they had the advantage. Marcus scanned the rooftops again. Something was happening out there in the darkness, something the enemy hadn't planned for either. The night suddenly felt different, as if another player had entered the game. Lieutenant Sullivan ordered everyone to hold fire and observe. The reduction in enemy fire was too sudden, too coordinated to be random. Someone or something was changing the dynamics of this battle. Marcus tightened his grip on his rifle and waited. In combat, the unexpected could be either salvation or disaster. He just hoped this time it would be the former. The silence that followed was almost more unsettling than the gunfire. Marcus kept his night vision scope trained on the northern rooftop, where the most aggressive shooter had been positioned just moments ago. Nothing moved. The position looked abandoned, though he couldn't see clearly enough to confirm what had happened. Danny Chen whispered urgently into his radio, still trying to establish contact with their command center. The mountains continued to block most signals, but he wasn't giving up. Meanwhile, Tom Hodges used the brief lull to redistribute ammunition among the team. They were running lower than anyone wanted to admit. Lieutenant Sullivan made a decision. They couldn't stay pinned down waiting for answers. He signaled for Marcus and another operator, Jeff Watson, to move forward and investigate the nearest silent position. It was risky, but they needed information about what was happening around them. Marcus nodded and checked his rifle one more time. Jeff moved beside him, and together they left the relative safety of their cover. They advanced slowly, using every shadow and piece of terrain for concealment. The compound remained eerily quiet. Only occasional shots from distant positions broke the silence. As they approached the building where the northern shooter had been, Marcus noticed something odd. The ladder leading to the rooftop was still in place, but there were no signs of movement above. He signaled Jeff to cover him while he climbed. Every step upward felt like it took an hour. His muscles tensed, expecting gunfire at any moment. When Marcus reached the rooftop edge, he paused and listened. Nothing. He pulled himself up quickly and swept the space with his rifle. What he found made his blood run cold. 2 enemy fighters lay motionless on the rooftop, but they hadn't been killed by American bullets. These were precision shots to the head and chest, taken from a distance. Marcus keyed his radio and reported what he found. Lieutenant Sullivan's response was immediate and puzzled. If the SEAL team hadn't killed these fighters, who had? There were no other friendly forces in the area. Intelligence had been clear about that. Jeff joined Marcus on the rooftop, and together they examined the scene more carefully. The angle of the bullet impacts suggested the shots had come from somewhere high and to the east. Marcus turned and scanned the mountain ridge overlooking the compound. The darkness made it impossible to see details, but someone was up there. Someone with a very accurate rifle. Back at the defensive position, the rest of the team remained alert. Brian Foster had treated a minor shrapnel wound on Tom Hodges' arm. Nothing serious, but enough to be concerning. They couldn't afford to have anyone operating at less than full capacity. Another enemy position suddenly went silent. This one was on the western side of the compound. The pattern was clear now. Someone was systematically eliminating the fighters who had the SEAL team trapped. But the question remained. Who was their mysterious benefactor, and why were they helping? Lieutenant Sullivan considered the possibilities. Could it be another American unit operating in secret? Special Activities Division, perhaps? Or maybe British SS? But the lack of communication suggested otherwise. Any friendly force would have made contact by now. Marcus and Jeff returned to the main group and reported their findings. The team gathered close, speaking in hushed tones despite the reduction in enemy fire. The situation had shifted from a desperate defensive fight to something much more complex and uncertain. Danny Chen finally managed to get a weak signal through to their command center. The message was brief and broken, but he conveyed their situation and the strange assistance they were receiving. Command's response was equally fragmented, but one thing came through clearly. They had no other assets in the immediate area. This revelation left the team in an uncomfortable position. Someone with considerable skill was helping them, but that person operated completely outside the known friendly forces. In a combat zone, unknown elements were dangerous regardless of whose side they appeared to be on. Tom Hodges suggested they use the opportunity to move toward the extraction point while they still could. The enemy's numbers were clearly diminished, though not eliminated. If they moved fast and stayed smart, they might be able to break out of the kill zone. But Lieutenant Sullivan hesitated. The mission had been to capture the high-value target. That objective hadn't changed, even if the circumstances had. He studied the central building through his scope. No movement visible, but that didn't mean it was empty. Marcus understood his team leader's dilemma. They had sacrificed too much to get this far. Giving up now meant the mission failed and potentially the target would disappear again for months or years. But pushing forward into the unknown carried its own massive risks. Another shot echoed across the compound, and a third enemy position went dark. The mysterious sniper was still active, still eliminating threats. Whoever they were, they showed no signs of stopping or revealing themselves. Brian Foster pointed out that they had wounded fighters who needed proper medical attention soon. Tom Hodges' arm was manageable, but the longer they stayed in hostile territory, the greater the risk of more serious injuries. Time was not on their side. The team watched as the enemy fighters began to show signs of confusion. Their coordinated ambush had fallen apart. Some were retreating from their positions, moving through the streets away from the compound. Others seemed to be trying to locate the source of the deadly accurate fire that had decimated their numbers. Marcus noticed one enemy fighter attempting to flee across an open courtyard. The man made it halfway before a single shot dropped him instantly. The precision was remarkable. The distance had to be at least 600 meters, possibly more. In darkness and with wind conditions that made such shots extraordinarily difficult, Jeff Watson, who had been a sniper before joining the SEAL team, watched with professional appreciation. He estimated the shooter was using a high-caliber rifle, probably a .338 Lapua Magnum or similar. The sound signature suggested a suppressed weapon, which added another layer of complexity to the already impressive marksmanship. Lieutenant Sullivan made his decision. They would advance toward the central building while the enemy remained disorganized. The mysterious sniper had given them an opportunity, and they would be foolish not to take it. But they would remain cautious, ready to retreat if the situation deteriorated again. The team formed up in their standard assault formation. They moved quickly across the compound, covering each other's movement with practiced efficiency. The central building loomed ahead, dark and silent. Whatever waited inside remained unknown. Marcus took point as they approached the entrance. His heart rate elevated, but his hands remained steady on his rifle. Years of training and experience took over. He became a tool focused entirely on the mission ahead. The door was unlocked, which immediately raised red flags. In hostile territory, unlocked doors usually meant traps. Tom Hodges examined the frame carefully with a flashlight, looking for tripwires or explosive devices. He found nothing, but that didn't ease anyone's concerns. Lieutenant Sullivan gave the signal to breach. The team entered swiftly, flowing through the doorway like they had done hundreds of times in training. The interior was sparse, furnished only with basic rugs and cushions. A cooking area occupied one corner. Everything looked recently used but currently abandoned. They cleared the first room and moved deeper into the building. Each doorway presented a potential threat. Each shadow could hide an enemy. But they encountered nothing. The building seemed completely empty, as if everyone had fled in a hurry. In the final room, they found evidence of their target's presence. Documents scattered on a low table, some with photographs that matched their intelligence briefings. A laptop computer still powered on. Tea glasses still warm to the touch. Someone had been here very recently. But the target himself was gone. The mission had failed, at least partially. They had the intelligence materials, which had value, but the man they came for had escaped. The question was when and how. Had he fled before the ambush started, or during the confusion that followed? Marcus secured the laptop and documents while the others maintained security. They needed to extract now before the situation changed again. The mysterious sniper had saved their lives, but the night was far from over. Lieutenant Sullivan ordered an immediate tactical withdrawal. The team had what intelligence they could gather, and staying longer only increased their risk. They formed up in a tight formation and began moving toward their extraction point, a clearing roughly 2 kilometers north of the compound. The streets of the village were eerily empty as they moved through. Doors remained closed, windows dark. The local population knew better than to emerge during a firefight. They would wait until morning to assess the damage and count their losses. Marcus took rear security, constantly checking behind them for pursuit. The enemy fighters who had survived seemed content to let them leave. Perhaps they were still trying to understand what had decimated their ambush. Perhaps they were regrouping for another attack. Either way, the SEAL team moved with urgency. Danny Chen maintained intermittent radio contact with their command center. An extraction helicopter was already en route, but it would take 30 minutes to reach them. 30 minutes was an eternity in hostile territory. Anything could happen in that time. As they left the village and entered more open terrain, the team spread out slightly to make themselves less vulnerable to explosives or ambush. The moon had risen, providing some natural illumination that made movement easier, but also made them more visible to potential threats. Tom Hodges applied fresh pressure to his wounded arm while walking. The bleeding had mostly stopped, but Brian Foster kept a close eye on him. In combat, small injuries could become serious problems quickly if not properly managed. Shock, infection, blood loss, all could incapacitate a fighter when he was needed most. They were halfway to the extraction point when Marcus heard it. A faint sound like metal on stone. He raised his fist, signaling the team to halt. Everyone dropped into defensive positions, weapons oriented toward potential threats. The desert night amplified small sounds, making it difficult to determine exact locations or distances. Lieutenant Sullivan used hand signals to query Marcus. What had he heard? Where was it coming from? Marcus pointed toward a rocky outcropping about 50 meters to their east. Something or someone was moving there, attempting to parallel their route. Jeff Watson deployed his thermal scope and scanned the indicated area. After a moment, he signaled that he detected a single heat signature, human-sized, moving slowly through the rocks. The figure wasn't approaching aggressively, but neither was it retreating. It seemed to be observing them. The team faced a difficult decision: engage the unknown contact, potentially alerting other hostiles to their position, or ignore it and continue to the extraction point, leaving a potential threat behind them. Lieutenant Sullivan weighed the options quickly. Before he could decide, the figure emerged from the rocks with hands clearly visible and empty. Even in the moonlight and at distance, it was clear this person wasn't dressed like the enemy fighters they had encountered. The clothing was different, more professional somehow, and the person moved with a confidence that suggested military training. Marcus kept his rifle trained on the approaching figure, while Lieutenant Sullivan called out in English, demanding identification. The figure stopped about 20 meters away, still in clear view but not close enough to present an immediate threat. American? The voice called back. It was male with an accent that was hard to place. Not Middle Eastern, but not quite American either. Something European perhaps, or Eastern European. Lieutenant Sullivan responded cautiously, neither confirming nor denying. He asked the figure to identify himself first. In combat zones, claiming to be American was a common tactic used by enemy forces. Trust had to be earned, not given freely. The figure remained still, understanding the SEAL team's caution. I am the one who has been shooting the men who trapped you. I think you know this already. I am not your enemy. I am alone, and I would like to speak with you before you leave. The team exchanged glances. This was almost certainly their mysterious guardian angel, the sniper who had systematically eliminated the ambush. But that didn't automatically make him trustworthy. Skilled shooters could have many different allegiances and motivations. Tom Hodges suggested they simply continue to the extraction point and leave the mystery unsolved. They had no obligation to engage with unknowns, regardless of how helpful they might have been. The primary mission was to get everyone home safely, and every moment of delay increased the risk. But Lieutenant Sullivan's curiosity was piqued. Someone with the skills to pull off those shots in those conditions was rare. Understanding who this person was and why they had helped could provide valuable intelligence. He made the decision to talk, but with strict security measures. He ordered Marcus and Jeff to advance and secure the figure while the rest of the team maintained covering positions. If this went bad, they could eliminate the threat quickly. Marcus moved forward carefully, his rifle never wavering from center mass on the figure. As he got closer, Marcus could make out more details. The man was tall, maybe 6'2", with a lean build that suggested years of physical conditioning. He wore civilian outdoor clothing, all dark colors, with a tactical vest underneath. No visible weapons in his hands, but surely armed somewhere. Marcus ordered him to turn around and place his hands on his head. The man complied without resistance. Jeff Watson approached from a different angle, ensuring they had multiple lines of fire if needed. A quick pat-down revealed a sidearm in a hip holster, a knife strapped to his leg, and various other tactical equipment. Marcus secured the weapons while Jeff kept his rifle pointed at the man's back. "May I turn around now?" the man asked politely. It is difficult to have a conversation this way. Lieutenant Sullivan approached, with Danny Chen and Brian Foster maintaining security positions behind him. Tom Hodges stayed further back, his rifle trained on the surrounding terrain in case this was an elaborate trap. When the man turned around, his face was lean and weathered, with sharp features and observant eyes that assessed the SEAL team with professional interest. His age was hard to determine, somewhere between 35 and 50. He had the look of someone who had spent years in harsh environments. "Who are you?" Lieutenant Sullivan asked directly, his weapon still ready. The man smiled slightly. "My name is not important. What is important is that you understand I mean you no harm. I have been tracking the man you came here to find. The same man, different reasons. This revelation changed things. If true, it meant they were after the same target, which created a temporary alliance of convenience. But it also raised questions about who this man worked for and what his ultimate goals were." "What reasons?" Lieutenant Sullivan pressed. The man's expression darkened. "Personal reasons. That man is responsible for killing people I cared about. I have been following him for 6 months across 3 countries. I was very close tonight, but your operation disrupted his security. He fled during the confusion, taking advantage of the situation." Marcus studied the man carefully. His story had the ring of truth, but stories often did when told by skilled operators. The real question was whether he posed a threat to the team's safety or could provide useful intelligence. Danny Chen's radio crackled. The extraction helicopter was 15 minutes out. They needed to reach the landing zone soon, or they would have to wait for another pickup window. Time was running out on this conversation. "Why did you help us?" Jeff Watson asked. "You could have let the ambush play out and picked up the pieces afterward." The man looked at Jeff with something like respect. "Because I am not a murderer. Those men who ambushed you are terrorists, but you are soldiers doing your duty. I have been a soldier. I understand. Also, I thought perhaps we could help each other." Lieutenant Sullivan understood now. This man wanted their resources, their intelligence network, their ability to track and locate targets. In exchange, he offered his own considerable skills and whatever information he had gathered during his pursuit. "We can't make deals in the field," Lieutenant Sullivan explained, "but I can pass your information up the chain. If you're legitimate, arrangements might be possible." The man nodded, expecting this answer. "I understand. But I ask one thing. When you find him again, and you will, please let me know. I need to see him face to face. I need him to understand why he dies." The intensity in his voice was undeniable. This was personal in a way that went beyond professional military operations. Marcus had seen that kind of focus before, in men who had lost everything and had nothing left but revenge. Lieutenant Sullivan made no promises, but he took the man's contact information, a satellite phone number that he claimed would reach him anywhere in the region. Whether that information would ever be used depended on many factors beyond any of their control. The extraction helicopter's sound became audible in the distance, the distinctive whump of rotor blades cutting through the night air. The team needed to move immediately. "We have to go," Lieutenant Sullivan stated. "Stay safe, whoever you are." The man stepped back, retrieving his weapons from where Marcus had placed them. "You as well. Perhaps we will meet again under better circumstances." The SEAL team moved quickly toward the extraction point, leaving the mysterious sniper behind in the darkness. Marcus glanced back once and saw the man had already disappeared into the rocky terrain, as if he had never been there at all. The helicopter descended into the landing zone with practiced precision, its crew chief scanning the surrounding terrain through night vision goggles. The SEAL team moved quickly from their perimeter positions toward the aircraft, maintaining security until the last possible moment. Marcus was the last man to board, his eyes still searching the darkness for any sign of threat. As the helicopter lifted off, he caught a brief glimpse of a figure standing on a distant ridge, silhouetted against the moonlit sky. The mysterious sniper was watching them leave, ensuring their safe departure. Then the helicopter banked away, and the figure was lost from view. The flight back to base took 40 minutes, during which the team remained largely silent. Each man processed the night's events in his own way. Combat affected everyone differently, even experienced operators. Some became more talkative after action, others retreated into themselves. Lieutenant Sullivan used the time to make preliminary notes for his after-action report. Danny Chen cleaned his equipment mechanically, his hands moving through familiar motions that required no conscious thought. Tom Hodges examined his wounded arm in the red light of the helicopter interior, satisfied that Brian Foster's field treatment had been adequate. Jeff Watson stared out the open door at the passing landscape below, his mind undoubtedly replaying those precision shots they had witnessed. When they landed at the forward operating base, a reception team was waiting. Medical personnel immediately took Tom Hodges to the aid station for proper treatment. Intelligence officers requested the laptop and documents Marcus had recovered. The rest of the team headed toward debriefing rooms where they would spend the next several hours recounting every detail of the mission. Lieutenant Sullivan's debriefing was the longest. He sat across from Major Patricia Hayes, their battalion intelligence officer, and Captain Robert Kim, operations officer. He walked them through the mission timeline from insertion to extraction, including every tactical decision and observation. When he reached the part about the mysterious sniper, both officers leaned forward with intense interest. Major Hayes asked him to repeat several details, making extensive notes. This was unusual, outside normal operational parameters. It required immediate attention from higher command. "You're certain he wasn't one of ours?" Major Hayes asked for the third time. "Absolutely certain, ma'am," Lieutenant Sullivan confirmed. Command confirmed no other assets in the area. This individual was operating independently. Captain Kim studied the satellite phone number Sullivan had written down. This could be a security breach. He might have been documenting your tactics, learning your procedures. The whole rescue could have been a setup to gain your trust. Lieutenant Sullivan had considered this possibility during the flight back. "Respectfully, sir, I don't think so. Those shots were real and they saved our lives. If he wanted to compromise us, there were easier ways. We were pinned down, completely vulnerable. He could have let the ambush finish us off." Major Hayes stood and walked to a map of the region mounted on the wall. She studied it silently for a moment before speaking. "We've had reports of a lone operator in this sector for months, always on the periphery of our operations, never making contact. Some of our intelligence assets thought it might be Russian or Iranian, but we could never get confirmation." This was news to Sullivan. If command had known about this person's existence, why hadn't they briefed the field teams? The major seemed to read his thoughts. "We didn't have enough solid information to put it in operational briefings," she explained. "Just rumors and unconfirmed sightings. We thought it might be disinformation, something the enemy was spreading to make us paranoid. Now I think we need to take it more seriously." Captain Kim suggested they attempt to contact the number the man had provided. It could be a trap, or it could lead to valuable intelligence about enemy operations in the region. The risk seemed worth taking, given the potential benefits. Major Hayes authorized the contact attempt but insisted it be done through secure channels with proper protocols. They would trace the signal, attempt to identify the phone's origin, and prepare for any contingency. If this mysterious sniper was willing to talk, they needed to understand his objectives and capabilities. Meanwhile, Marcus underwent his own debriefing with a junior intelligence officer. He described what he had seen on the rooftop in detail, the positioning of the bodies, the angle of bullet impacts, the precision of the shots. The intelligence officer took notes rapidly, occasionally asking for clarification on technical details. "How good would someone have to be to make those shots?" the officer asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. Olympic-level marksmanship, combined with combat experience and advanced tactical training. We're not talking about a weekend hunter. This was someone who has spent years, maybe decades, perfecting those skills. And doing it at night under pressure with moving targets? That's top 1% of snipers worldwide. The intelligence officer looked impressed and concerned in equal measure. Having someone with those capabilities operating in their area of operations was both an asset and a potential threat. It all depended on whose side he was really on. Back in their team room, the operators gathered to decompress. These informal sessions after missions were important for mental health and unit cohesion. They could speak freely without officers present, sharing thoughts and concerns that might not make it into official reports. Tom Hodges returned from the aid station with his arm properly bandaged and a prescription for antibiotics. The wound was clean and would heal without complications. He joked about adding another scar to his collection, though everyone could see the relief in his eyes that it hadn't been worse. Jeff Watson brought up what they were all thinking. So who do you think he really was? CIA? Some kind of special operations unit we don't know about? Danny Chen shook his head. Did you hear his accent? That wasn't American. European, maybe Eastern European. I'm thinking former military from one of those countries. Working on his own agenda now. Brian Foster suggested mercenary, someone hired by a private interest to eliminate the same targets the military was pursuing. It wouldn't be the first time private contractors and official military operations overlapped in the region. The lines between official and unofficial action had become increasingly blurred over the years. Marcus shared his impression of the man. Whatever he is, he's professional, disciplined. The way he approached us, the way he communicated, that was someone with military training. And the personal motivation he mentioned, the revenge angle, that felt genuine. You can't fake that kind of intensity. Lieutenant Sullivan entered the room and the conversation paused. Team leaders usually gave their operators space during these sessions, but Sullivan had always been more approachable than most officers. He joined them informally, accepting a bottle of water from the cooler. Command is taking this seriously, he informed them. They're going to attempt contact with our mystery man. If he's legit and his information is good, there might be possibilities for cooperation. If he's not, well, we'll deal with that too. Tom Hodges asked the question they all wanted answered. Are we going after that target again, sir? Sullivan nodded. The intelligence materials you recovered are being analyzed now. The laptop might have location data, communication logs, financial records. If we're lucky, it'll lead us right to him, and next time we'll be better prepared. The team understood. Missions rarely ended with a single operation. Targets were tracked for weeks, months, sometimes years before successful capture or elimination. This was just one step in a longer process. They would likely be back in that region soon, pursuing the same man through the same dangerous terrain. Marcus thought about the mysterious sniper, alone out there in hostile territory, pursuing his own version of justice. There was something almost romantic about it, a lone warrior on a personal quest. But Marcus knew the reality was probably much harder and lonelier than any story would suggest. Days passed while intelligence analysts worked through the recovered materials. The SEAL team conducted training exercises and prepared for their next mission. Life on a forward operating base followed a predictable rhythm. Prepare, execute, recover, repeat. The monotony was broken only by the intensity of actual combat operations. On the fourth day after their mission, Major Hayes called Lieutenant Sullivan to a secure communication room. She had news about the mysterious sniper, and it wasn't what anyone had expected. We made contact through the number he provided, she explained, showing Sullivan a transcript of the satellite phone conversation. He was cooperative, almost eager to share information. He provided details about our target's movements over the past 6 months that aligned perfectly with our own intelligence. Sullivan read through the transcript carefully. The man had indeed been tracking their target across multiple countries. He had documented safe houses, meeting locations, patterns of movement. This was intelligence that would have taken teams of analysts months to compile. He was offering it freely. What's the catch? Sullivan asked. Because there was always a catch. Major Hayes pulled up a photograph on her computer screen. It showed a younger version of the man they had met, in military uniform, standing with a group of other soldiers. The insignia was foreign but recognizable to anyone who studied international military forces. His name is Alexei Volkov, she revealed. Former Russian Special Forces, Spetsnaz. He served for 15 years before leaving the military under unclear circumstances. Since then, he's been off the grid, working as a private security contractor in various conflict zones. Sullivan studied the photograph. So their guardian angel was Russian. That complicated things considerably. Relations between the United States and Russia were tense at best, hostile at worst. Having a former Russian special operator helping American forces raised all sorts of political and security questions. There's more, Major Hayes continued. We did some digging into his background. 3 years ago, his wife and daughter were killed in a terrorist attack in Dagestan. The man you're hunting, your high-value target, planned that attack. Volkov has been pursuing him ever since, using his own resources and contacts. Understanding dawned on Sullivan. This wasn't about geopolitics or military strategy. This was about a father and husband seeking justice for his murdered family. That changed the entire dynamic of their interaction. What does Command want us to do? Sullivan asked. Major Hayes closed the files on her computer. They're still deciding, but in the meantime, we're authorized to maintain contact with Volkov. His intelligence is valuable, and his skills speak for themselves. If we can use his resources to locate the target, it benefits everyone. Sullivan considered the implications. Working with a Russian operator, even informally, was unprecedented in his experience. But combat created strange alliances, the enemy of my enemy and all that. If Volkov could help them complete their mission, perhaps it was worth the risk. 2 weeks after their first encounter with Alexei Volkov, Lieutenant Sullivan received orders for a new mission. Intelligence analysts had traced the high-value target to a compound in the mountainous border region between Afghanistan and Pakistan. The information came from multiple sources, including detailed surveillance reports provided by Volkov himself. The SEAL team gathered in the operations center for their mission briefing. Major Hayes stood before a large screen displaying satellite imagery of the target location. The compound was isolated, perched on a hillside with clear views of the surrounding valley. Multiple structures dotted the property, connected by stone walls that would provide excellent defensive positions. This won't be like last time, Major Hayes warned. Intelligence suggests at least 20 armed fighters protecting the compound. They're expecting trouble after what happened 2 weeks ago. Security has been significantly enhanced. Marcus studied the terrain carefully. The approach would be difficult. Open ground on 3 sides meant they would be exposed during their assault. The mountain behind the compound was steep and rocky, but it offered the only real cover for an approach. Captain Kim outlined the mission parameters. They would insert by helicopter 3 kilometers from the target, then move on foot through the mountains. The approach would take several hours, timing their arrival for just before dawn when guards would be tired and less alert. Quick reaction forces would be on standby if things went wrong. Lieutenant Sullivan asked about air support. Captain Kim explained that attack helicopters would be available, but only as a last resort. The compound was close to the Pakistani border, and any major engagement could create diplomatic complications. The mission needed to be fast and surgical. Then Major Hayes dropped the real bombshell. We've been authorized to coordinate with Alexei Volkov for this operation. He'll be operating independently but providing overwatch from an elevated position. His role is to eliminate external threats and provide early warning if reinforcements approach. The team exchanged glances. Working with a foreign operator, especially a Russian, was unusual. But given what they had witnessed of Volkov's capabilities, having him on their side was preferable to operating without that advantage. Tom Hodges raised a practical concern. How do we coordinate with someone outside our command structure? What if communications break down or he decides to go his own way? Major Hayes acknowledged the risk. He'll be on our tactical frequency. We can't give him orders, but he's agreed to follow the overall mission plan. Beyond that, you'll have to trust that his desire to get the target aligns with ours. After the briefing, Lieutenant Sullivan pulled Marcus aside. I want you to be our primary contact with Volkov during the mission. You've got good instincts about people. If something feels off about his behavior, I need to know immediately. Marcus understood the responsibility. He would essentially be monitoring a wild card element in their operation, someone with skills that could save them or endanger them depending on his true motivations and reliability under pressure. The team spent the next 24 hours preparing equipment and rehearsing their assault plan. They built a mock-up of the compound using portable barriers and practiced their entry procedures until everyone could execute them flawlessly, even in darkness. Every second would count during the actual operation. Brian Foster prepared his medical kit with extra supplies. The remote location meant evacuation would take longer if someone was seriously wounded. He needed to be ready for anything from gunshot wounds to blast injuries to environmental casualties like heat exhaustion or dehydration. Jeff Watson zeroed his rifle and checked his optical equipment multiple times. As the team's designated marksman, he would provide precision fire support during the assault. He also loaded special ammunition designed to penetrate body armor, anticipating that the enemy fighters might be better equipped than usual. Danny Chen tested all communication equipment thoroughly. Maintaining contact between team members and with command would be critical. He programmed the frequency Volkov would be using into everyone's radios and briefed them on proper communication protocols when coordinating with an external asset. The night before the mission, Marcus had trouble sleeping. He kept thinking about Volkov, alone out there in the mountains, driven by personal tragedy to hunt dangerous men across hostile territory. What kind of man could sustain that level of focus for years? What happened to someone psychologically when revenge became their only purpose? At 0300 hours, the team loaded onto their transport helicopter. The flight to the insertion point was smooth and uneventful. They deployed into a rocky valley under cover of darkness, the helicopter disappearing quickly to avoid detection. The movement through the mountains was exhausting. They covered 3 kilometers of rough terrain in just over 2 hours, moving slowly to avoid making noise that might alert enemy scouts. Marcus felt every kilogram of his equipment weighing him down as they climbed steep hillsides and navigated between massive boulders. Lieutenant Sullivan called for a brief halt about 500 meters from the target. The team took defensive positions while he established communication with command and with Volkov. Marcus listened to the radio traffic, hearing Volkov's accented voice confirm he was in position with clear lines of sight to the compound. "I count 22 hostiles," Volkov reported calmly. "Most are sleeping, but 6 guards patrol perimeter. 2 guards on main building roof, 4 walking ground level. They change shift every 2 hours. Next change is in 45 minutes. This intelligence was exactly what the team needed. They could time their assault for right after the guard change, when the new sentries would be less alert and still adjusting to their positions. Lieutenant Sullivan adjusted the mission timeline accordingly. The team moved into their final assault positions. Marcus, Tom Hodges, and Jeff Watson would approach from the east, providing covering fire and securing the compound's outer buildings. Lieutenant Sullivan, Danny Chen, and Brian Foster would breach the main structure, where intelligence suggested the target was sleeping. Through his night vision scope, Marcus could see the compound clearly now. Stone walls glowed green in the enhanced image. Guards moved with casual confidence, unaware that death was creeping toward them through the darkness. He felt the familiar pre-combat tension, that combination of fear and anticipation that never completely went away no matter how many missions he completed. Volkov's voice came over the radio again. "Guard change happening now. 2 new sentries moving to roof positions. Wait for my signal before you advance." Everyone froze in place, watching as the guards completed their shift rotation. The compound had lights powered by a generator, creating pools of illumination that the assault team would need to avoid. Shadows would be their allies during the approach. "West side guard distracted," Volkov reported. "North guard sitting down. South guard walking away from your approach path. East side clear. You have 30-second window starting now." The team moved with practiced efficiency. They covered the open ground quickly, reaching the outer wall without being detected. Tom Hodges placed a small charge on a wooden gate while the others provided security. The explosion would wake everyone, so timing from that point forward would be critical. Marcus heard Volkov's rifle fire twice in quick succession. The 2 rooftop guards dropped silently, eliminated before they could raise an alarm. The precision was remarkable. 2 moving targets at over 600 meters, both neutralized within seconds of each other. "Roof clear," Volkov confirmed. "Proceed with breach." Tom Hodges detonated his charge. The helicopter touched down in the compound's courtyard, its rotors kicking up clouds of dust and debris. The team moved quickly to load their prisoner, maintaining security despite their exhaustion. Marcus kept scanning the surrounding terrain, alert for any final threats that might emerge from the darkness. Lieutenant Sullivan made a radio call to Volkov before they departed. "Overwatch, this is ground element. Mission complete. Are you clear to extract?" There was a pause before Volkov responded, and when he did, his voice carried an emotion Marcus hadn't heard before. "Ground element, I need 5 minutes before you depart." There is something I must do. Sullivan understood immediately what Volkov meant. He wanted to see the prisoner face to face, to confront the man responsible for murdering his family. It was the reason Volkov had spent 3 years hunting across continents and war zones. This moment was what he had been working toward. Negative, Overwatch, Sullivan replied firmly. Situation remains hostile. We cannot delay extraction for personal matters. The radio remained silent for several long seconds. Marcus could imagine the internal struggle Volkov must be experiencing. He had helped them succeed in their mission, and now they were denying him the closure he desperately sought. But military operations couldn't bend to personal needs no matter how justified they might be. I understand, Volkov finally responded, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Thank you for the opportunity to assist. I will extract separately. The helicopter lifted off with the team and their prisoner aboard. Marcus watched through the open door as the compound grew smaller below them. He thought he caught a glimpse of a figure on a distant ridge, backlit by the rising sun. Then they banked away and the figure was gone. During the flight back to base, the captured terrorist sat between 2 SEAL operators, his eyes downcast. He had been a powerful figure in his organization, responsible for planning attacks that had killed dozens of innocent people. Now he was just a frightened man in handcuffs, facing justice for his crimes. Tom Hodges leaned close to Marcus and shouted over the helicopter noise. Do you think Volkov will give up now? We got the guy. His revenge is over. Marcus shook his head. His revenge isn't about capturing the guy. It's about something deeper. I think he'll keep pursuing this until he gets what he really wants. Brian Foster checked their prisoner's vital signs mechanically, ensuring he remained stable for the flight. The man would be handed over to intelligence personnel for extensive interrogation. Information extracted from him could prevent future attacks and help dismantle his terrorist network. Back at the base, the team went through the standard post-mission procedures. Equipment was cleaned and secured. Weapons were cleared and stored. Medical checks ensured everyone was physically sound despite the intense operation. Then came the debriefings where every detail would be documented and analyzed. Lieutenant Sullivan's debriefing with Major Hayes focused heavily on Volkov's contribution to the mission's success. His intelligence had been accurate, his tactical support had been invaluable, and his precision fire had eliminated multiple threats that could have resulted in American casualties. Command is impressed, Major Hayes admitted. They're discussing the possibility of establishing a more formal relationship with Volkov. He's proven himself reliable and highly capable. Sullivan had mixed feelings about this. Volkov was undeniably skilled, but he was also driven by personal vendetta rather than military discipline. That made him unpredictable in ways that formal military operators were not. With respect, ma'am, I think Volkov operates best outside official structures, Sullivan suggested. The moment we try to control him or direct him too much, we might lose his cooperation. He helped us because our goals aligned with his. That might not always be the case. Major Hayes considered this perspective. She had enough experience to understand that unconventional assets required unconventional management. Sometimes the best approach was to maintain a loose relationship, rather than trying to formalize everything with contracts and protocols. Over the following days, the base buzzed with activity surrounding the captured terrorist. Intelligence officers conducted interrogations. Analysts processed the information being extracted. Higher command coordinated with allied intelligence agencies about additional operations the interrogation might enable. Marcus found himself thinking often about Volkov, wondering where he had gone and what he was doing. The Russian had appeared in their lives like a ghost, helped them complete their mission and then vanished again into the wilderness. It seemed like an incomplete story, unfinished business hanging in the air. 3 days after the successful mission, Lieutenant Sullivan called the team together for an informal meeting. He had information that wasn't official yet, but would affect them all soon enough. I received an encrypted message through back channels, he explained. It's from Volkov. He wanted us to know that he's leaving the region. He said that watching us capture the target gave him something he didn't expect. A sense that justice was being served, even if not in the way he originally imagined. Danny Chen looked skeptical. He's just giving up? After 3 years of hunting this guy? Sullivan shook his head. I don't think he's giving up. I think he's found a different kind of resolution. Seeing the man captured, knowing he'll face trial and imprisonment, maybe that's enough. Or maybe it's as close to enough as Volkov can get. Marcus understood this better than he could explain. Revenge was ultimately hollow. It couldn't bring back the dead or undo the past. Volkov had spent years learning this lesson the hard way. Perhaps helping the SEAL team had shown him that justice through proper channels, while less personally satisfying, was more meaningful in the long run. Jeff Watson asked the question they all wondered about. "Do you think we'll ever see him again?" Sullivan pulled out a small object and placed it on the table. It was a challenge coin, the kind military units created to commemorate operations or build unit identity. But this one was unique. It bore no official insignia, just a simple design of a mountain ridge and a single star. This was included with Volkov's message, Sullivan explained. He said that if we ever need his help again and our cause is just, he'll come. The coin is his way of saying we're connected now, part of an unofficial brotherhood that crosses national boundaries. The team passed the coin around, each examining it carefully. It represented something rare in the world of military operations, a genuine bond formed across enemy lines, created by shared danger and mutual respect. Tom Hodges held the coin up to the light. An American SEAL team and a Russian Spetsnaz operator. A few years ago, that would have been impossible. Hell, it should still be impossible. Brian Foster smiled slightly. Maybe that's what makes it meaningful. We're supposed to be adversaries, but we found common ground in pursuing the same enemy. That says something about how complicated the world really is. The conversation drifted to other topics, but Marcus kept thinking about the coin and what it represented. In a world often divided by politics and ideology, individuals could still find ways to work together toward shared goals. It was a small thing, perhaps insignificant in the grand scheme of geopolitical conflicts, but it mattered. Later that evening, Marcus sat alone in the team room, writing an email to his wife Sarah. He tried to explain what the mission had meant, how they had been helped by an unlikely ally, and what he had learned about courage and dedication from a man he barely knew. "There are still good people in the world," he wrote, "even in the strangest places and the most complicated circumstances. Sometimes it takes combat to reveal that truth. I wish I could tell you more details. But just know that I'm grateful for the reminder that humanity transcends borders and politics." The captured terrorist provided intelligence that led to multiple follow-up operations over the coming months. His network was systematically dismantled, preventing several planned attacks and saving countless lives. The SEAL team participated in some of these missions, always professional and always focused on their duty. But Marcus never forgot about Alexei Volkov, the ghost sniper who had appeared when they needed him most. Sometimes late at night when he had trouble sleeping, Marcus would wonder where Volkov was and what he was doing. Was he still wandering conflict zones? Had he found peace? Was he helping others the way he had helped them? The challenge coin Sullivan had received remained in the team room, displayed in a small case alongside other mission mementos. It served as a reminder that warfare wasn't always about grand strategies and national interests. Sometimes it was about individual moments of courage, unexpected alliances, and the basic human need to do what was right, despite the complexity of the circumstances. Lieutenant Sullivan eventually wrote a classified report about Volkov's assistance, recommending that channels remain open for future cooperation. The report made its way through various levels of command, generating discussion and debate about the wisdom of working with foreign operators outside official agreements. Some senior officers were skeptical, worried about security risks and precedents being set. Others saw the practical value in maintaining relationships with capable individuals who operated in areas where American forces couldn't or shouldn't go officially. In the end, the decision was made to keep the possibility of future cooperation open but informal. No contracts, no official agreements, just a back channel that could be used if circumstances warranted. It was a very military solution. Acknowledge reality without committing to anything definite. Major Hayes told Sullivan privately that she respected what he and his team had done. "You made a judgment call in the field," she said. "You trusted your instincts about Volkov and it paid off. That's what good officers do. They assess situations in real time and make decisions based on what they observe, not just what the briefing papers say." Marcus received a commendation for his actions during both missions, Though the official citation was carefully worded to avoid mentioning Volkov or the unusual circumstances of their cooperation, such things remained classified, known only to those with proper clearances and need to know. The team eventually rotated back to the United States for leave and retraining. They returned to families and normal life, though combat operators never truly left the war behind. It stayed with them in dreams and memories, in the bonds formed with teammates and in the knowledge that they had faced death and survived. Marcus kept a photograph in his wallet, taken during one of their training exercises. The whole team was in it, smiling despite the exhaustion, covered in dust and sweat. They looked young and confident, ready for whatever challenges came next. He wondered if Volkov had any photographs like that from his own military service, reminders of better times before tragedy had set him on his solitary path. 18 months passed since the mission that had brought Alexei Volkov into their lives. Marcus had completed 2 more combat deployments, both successful, but neither as memorable or significant as that night when a mysterious sniper had saved them from certain death. Life continued its rhythm of training, deployment, family time, and preparation for the next mission. The captured terrorist had been tried and sentenced to life imprisonment. His testimony during interrogation had indeed led to the disruption of multiple terror cells across 3 continents. Dozens of potential attacks were prevented, and hundreds of innocent lives were saved because of the intelligence extracted from him. The mission had proven to be one of the most valuable operations of the entire campaign. Marcus was home in Virginia Beach on a rare month of leave when his phone rang with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer it, but something made him pick up. The voice on the other end was accented and familiar, though he hadn't heard it in over a year. "Staff Sergeant Reed, this is Alexei Volkov. I hope I am not disturbing you." Marcus sat up straight, suddenly alert despite being in his own living room. "Volkov, no, not at all. I'm surprised to hear from you. How did you get my personal number?" There was a slight laugh on the other end. "I have my ways. Please do not be concerned about security. This line is clean. I wanted to reach out because I thought you might like to know what I have been doing since we last worked together." Marcus listened as Volkov explained his activities over the past 18 months. He had left the Middle East after their mission and returned to Eastern Europe. There, he had been helping local authorities track down human trafficking networks, using his unique skills to locate and rescue victims while identifying the criminals responsible. "It is different work than before," Volkov explained. "Instead of seeking revenge, I am trying to prevent others from experiencing the pain I felt. I think perhaps your Lieutenant Sullivan was right when he suggested justice through proper channels is more meaningful than personal vengeance." Marcus felt genuine happiness hearing this. The man who had been consumed by revenge had found a better path, one that honored his family's memory by protecting others rather than simply killing their enemies. It was a redemption story, the kind that happened rarely in real life. "That's good to hear," Marcus said sincerely. "What you're doing makes a difference. Those victims you're helping, they'll remember you as a hero for the rest of their lives." Volkov was quiet for a moment. "I am no hero. Just a man trying to find purpose after losing everything that mattered. But I wanted to thank you and your team. That mission we worked together. It showed me something I had forgotten, that working with good people toward a just cause is more satisfying than working alone driven by hatred." They talked for another 20 minutes, sharing stories and experiences. Volkov asked about the team members by name, showing genuine interest in their well-being. Marcus learned that Volkov had established a small security company that specialized in rescue operations, employing other former special operations personnel from various countries. "We are like you," Volkov explained. "A team of different backgrounds and nationalities, but united by common values. We operate in places where official forces cannot go, doing work that needs to be done but falls outside normal law enforcement capabilities." Marcus could hear the satisfaction in Volkov's voice. He had found a new tribe, a new purpose, a way to channel his skills and experience toward positive ends. It was everything Marcus hoped the man would find when they had parted ways that night in Afghanistan. Before ending the call, Volkov said something that stayed with Marcus for years afterward. "Tell Lieutenant Sullivan that the coin he carries means something to me. It means that in a world full of enemies, we found a way to be brothers. That is rare and precious. If he ever needs me, truly needs me, I will come. That is a promise I make with my whole heart." After the call ended, Marcus sat quietly, processing the conversation. Sarah came into the room and asked who had called. He tried to explain, though so much of it was classified that he could only share the broad strokes. A man they had worked with overseas was doing well, finding his way toward healing and purpose. Sarah understood without needing all the details. She had been a military spouse long enough to know that her husband carried stories he could never fully share. The important thing was that whatever had happened had affected him positively, had reinforced his faith in the goodness of people even in the darkest circumstances. Marcus called Lieutenant Sullivan, who was stationed in California now, promoted to commander and leading his own SEAL team. He told him about Volkov's call and passed along the message about the challenge coin. Sullivan listened carefully and then shared his own thoughts. "You know, Reed, when I look back on my career, that mission stands out. Not because of the tactical success or the intelligence gained, but because we made a real connection with someone from a completely different world. We saw past the uniform and the nationality to the human being underneath. That's what matters in the end." They talked about the other team members. Danny Chen had left active duty and was working for the National Security Agency, using his technical skills in a different way. Tom Hodges was now an instructor at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center, teaching the next generation of SEALs. Brian Foster had transferred to a medical position, providing trauma training to military personnel worldwide. Jeff Watson remained on active duty, still conducting missions in various hotspots. The brotherhood forged in combat remained strong despite physical separation. They stayed in touch through messages and occasional reunions. The bond created by shared danger and mutual trust never really faded, even as years passed and circumstances changed. Marcus eventually shared the story of Volkov with his daughters when they were old enough to understand. He explained how someone from another country, someone who could have been an enemy in different circumstances, had instead chosen to help when it mattered most. He used it as a lesson about not judging people by their nationality or background, but by their actions and character. His oldest daughter asked if he thought he would ever see Volkov again. Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. "Maybe someday. The world is smaller than we think and paths cross in unexpected ways. If we do meet again, I'll be happy to shake his hand and thank him properly for what he did." Years continued to pass. Marcus advanced in rank and eventually took on training and advisory roles himself. The direct combat missions became less frequent as younger operators took the frontline positions. It was the natural progression of a military career, though he sometimes missed the intensity and clarity of purpose that came with direct action. He never forgot the lessons learned that night when Volkov had saved them, about trust that could be built even in impossible circumstances, about how revenge was ultimately hollow compared to justice, about the unexpected connections that could form between people who were supposed to be adversaries. The challenge coin Volkov had sent remained on display in the SEAL Team Heritage Room, alongside other mementos and artifacts from notable missions. New team members would ask about it during their orientation, and the story would be told again, though always carefully to protect classified information. The tale became almost legendary within the community. The night when a Russian Spetsnaz operator had materialized out of nowhere to help an American SEAL team, driven by personal tragedy, but finding redemption through cooperation rather than revenge. It was the kind of story that reminded everyone in the special operations community that they were all warriors first, and national differences second. Marcus retired from active duty after 22 years of service. He moved with Sarah to a quiet mountain town where he could hike and fish, and slowly decompress from decades of combat stress. The transition to civilian life was difficult, as it was for most veterans, but he had his family and his memories and his sense of having served honorably. On his last day in uniform, he stood alone in the team room one final time. He looked at the challenge coin in its display case, remembering that dark night in Afghanistan when everything had seemed hopeless until a guardian angel with a rifle had appeared on a distant ridge. Marcus pulled out his phone and sent a message to the number Volkov had called from years earlier. He didn't know if it was still active or if Volkov would receive it, but he wanted to try. "This is Marcus Reed. I'm retiring today after 22 years. I wanted you to know that what you did for us, what you showed us about courage and honor and choosing justice over revenge, has stayed with me every day since. Thank you for being there when we needed you most." Thank you for showing me that brotherhood transcends borders. I hope you found peace. You certainly gave me something to aspire to." He hit send and put the phone away, not expecting a response. But as he walked out of the building for the last time, his phone buzzed with a reply. "Congratulations on an honorable career, my friend. Know that I think of you and your team often. The lessons work both ways. You showed me that justice is possible even after terrible loss. We are all better for having known each other. Perhaps we will meet again one day, in better times and peaceful circumstances. Until then, stay safe, Alexei." Marcus smiled as he read the message. The story that had begun with gunfire and desperation had ended with mutual respect and genuine friendship. It was a small victory in a complicated world, but victories came in all sizes. Sometimes the smallest ones meant the most. He climbed into his truck and drove toward home, toward Sarah and his daughters and the next chapter of his life. The warrior phase was ending, but the lessons learned would remain forever, chief among them, that in the darkest moments help could come from the most unexpected sources, and that humans had an infinite capacity for courage, sacrifice, and connection if they chose to embrace it. The mountains rose around him as he drove, their peaks touching a blue sky dotted with white clouds. Somewhere out there, perhaps in similar mountains on a different continent, Alexei Volkov was probably pursuing his own mission, helping people who desperately needed it, living the life he had rebuilt from tragedy. And somewhere in the archives of military intelligence, in classified reports that few would ever read, the story of their cooperation remained documented. A footnote in history, perhaps, but an important one, proof that even in war, even across enemy lines, common humanity could triumph over division. Marcus rolled down his window and let the mountain air fill his lungs. He thought about all the missions, all the teammates, all the close calls and victories and defeats. But the memory that stood out most clearly was of a dark night in Afghanistan, pinned down and outgunned, when salvation had come from a sniper on a ridge. The world was full of good people doing hard things in difficult circumstances. Alexei Volkov was one of them. The SEAL team had been filled with them, and Marcus had been privileged to serve alongside them all, learning lessons that would last a lifetime. As he drove toward his future, Marcus carried with him the knowledge that he had been part of something meaningful. Not just the missions and the tactical victories, but the human connections forged in extreme circumstances. The bonds that proved over and over again that courage and honor weren't limited by nationality or uniform. They were universal qualities, found in any person willing to risk everything for what was right. And in the end, that was what military service was really about. Not the weapons or the tactics or the geopolitics, but the individuals who chose to stand up when standing up mattered most. Marcus Reed had been one of those individuals, and he had been blessed to know many others like him, including a Russian sniper he had met for only minutes but would remember forever. That was enough. That was everything.